before my elder sister's wedding. She became a widow before the ceremony even began, so my parents asked me to take her place. I had no objections, and I carried her spirit tablet as I married into the Marquis of Jin'an's household. 6 months later, my elder sister married my fiancé, and the heir to the Marquis of Jin'an had faked his death returned triumphantly to the capital. Having achieved extraordinary military exploits, the emperor bestowed upon him the title of Grand General of Glory and Might. Overnight, I became the esteemed general's wife, while my elder sister and my parents were overcome with remorse, begging me to switch places with her. I, for one, didn't mind, but I wondered if my brother-in-law who had been reborn would agree. After all, in my previous life, to save me from trouble, he had stepped forward when my parents forced me to take her place, bringing our wedding date forward. Grateful for his protection, I not only devoted myself to planning his future but also, without complaint, fulfilled my duties to honor his parents and raise his children. Yet, the very first thing he did upon achieving fame and fortune was to demote his wife to a concubine. Using his lifetime of military merits, he exchanged my older sister for a lavish dowry and married her in grand style. He said, "If you hadn't begged me so desperately back then, I would have married you young. I've already granted you a lifetime of luxury. What more could you possibly want?" My 2 children also pleaded with me, "Mother, can't you be more magnanimous? What's wrong with giving in to father? He and aunt are deeply in love. Yet because of you, he's been unhappy for half his life. Don't you have even a shred of regret?" Enraged, I coughed up blood and set the Prime Minister's mansion ablaze. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back before my elder sister's wedding. Main text. You know full well how frail your elder sister is. If she were to marry into the Marquis of Jin'an's household, how long could she endure such torment? Are you so heartless that you'd watch her die with your own eyes? A sorrowful plea reached my ears, and as I opened my eyes, I met my mother's gaze filled with resentment and dissatisfaction. It felt as though something had tugged at my heart, but the sensation quickly subsided. Wasn't I dead? What was going on? Having spent half my life as the chancellor's wife, I had long since mastered the art of keeping my emotions hidden. I discreetly surveyed my surroundings and realized I was in my father's study. No sooner had my mother finished speaking than a wave of quiet sobbing reached my ears from beside me. I looked over and saw my dear older sister, Su Mayan. She cast a deeply sorrowful glance at me. "It's only natural that you don't want to marry into the Marquis household. If anyone is to blame, blame my own ill fortune." With that, she threw herself into mother's arms, tears streaming down her face. "I just can't bear to leave father and mother." Hearing this, mother could no longer hold back her emotions. She embraced her and wept bitterly. Father, though still relatively young, was heartbroken for his wife and daughter. With a look of anger on his face, he pointed at me. "Look at the mess you've made. You've upset your mother this much and you're happy about it. How could I have given birth to such a heartless, ungrateful ingrate?" Seeing this, it suddenly dawned on me. I had been reborn back to the time before Huo Linyuan's wedding. In my previous life, my parents had forced me to take Huo Linyuan's place and marry into the Jin'an Marquis household. When I refused, they locked me in the courtyard and subjected me to all manner of threats and bribes. My mother and Su Mayan even secretly plotted that if I refused, they would tie me up and force me into the wedding palanquin on the day of the ceremony. I overheard Su Mayan discussing it with her maid. "Well, slip her some silencing potion behind mother's back. Once she's inside the Marquis mansion and can't speak, what trouble could she possibly cause?" Left with no choice, I appealed to my fiancé, Song Huishu. My father hadn't expected me to drag him into this, so he had no choice but to abandon the plan to have me take my sister's place. But for the next 10 or so years, as I accompanied Song Huishu to our posting in the provinces, we had little contact with home beyond the occasional letter. It wasn't until Song Huishu was transferred from his post as prefect of Yongzhou to serve as assistant minister of war while my father remained stuck in his position as assistant lecturer at the Imperial Academy that he began to grow close to me in his quest for promotion. Seeing that I kept my eyes downcast and showed no reaction, Su Mayan buried her face in her mother's lap and wept pitifully. If I cannot bear it and pass away before you too, I implore my younger sister to take my place and serve you well. How could my mother bear to hear her speak like that? She held her close, lamenting her misfortune and vowing to die in her place, fully revealing the depth of their mother-daughter bond. My father, however, was thoroughly exasperated. He slammed his fist on the table and scolded me, pointing at me. I've told you time and again that in 2 years' time, you'll be allowed to return to your family. At that point, they'll find you a good match. For now, I'm merely having you go through the motions for Mayan's sake. What more do you have to complain about? I sighed bitterly to myself. Everyone knows the many benefits of marrying into a noble family, but few realize that such alliances are easy to form but hard to dissolve. How could he simply decide to send me back home whenever he pleased, without the emperor's decree? I would rather die than leave the Jin'an Marquis mansion. Others might not know this, but how could my father not? He was just trying to placate me for the moment. In my previous life, I knew my parents favored Su Mayan. Yet I still clung to a faint hope that they might spare a thought for me as well. But reality has repeatedly shown me just how superfluous my existence is. Since that is the case, I'll do without this cheap, so-called parental affection. I wiped away non-existent tears from the corner of my eye and said in a choked voice, "Fine. I'll marry in my sister's place." Perhaps they hadn't expected me to agree so readily. The study fell silent for a moment before Su Muiyuan's anxious voice rang out. "Kui Zhu. You've agreed to marry into the Marquis household, haven't you?" The three of them looked at me expectantly, living up to their expectations. I nodded and continued. "But I have one condition." My mother, as if afraid I might change my mind, hurriedly said, "As long as you agree, we'll grant you any condition you ask." My father nodded with relief, so I didn't hold back. Since I'm marrying into the Jin'an Marquis household in my sister's place, in addition to all the dowry mother has prepared for her, I also want the portion of the dowry you've prepared for me, as well as the 2 estates and 3 shops grandmother left behind in linen. My parents were both taken aback. They hadn't expected that. In addition to claiming Su Muiyuan's and my own dowries, I'd also set my sights on grandmother's dowry. Upon hearing this, Su Mayan was the first to react. "No way. Why should I give you all my dowry? I won't agree to that." I couldn't be bothered to argue with her. Turning to my parents, whose faces had turned grim, I bowed and said, "I simply wish to keep more memories of mother and grandmother. I hope father and mother will grant my request." When I was born, grandmother had just recovered from a serious illness. To fulfill his filial duty, my father left me in the countryside with grandmother after he passed the imperial examination, so that I could take good care of her in his stead. 2 years ago, grandmother passed away, and I was brought back to the capital to reunite with my parents. I had spent 14 years with grandmother and was deeply attached to her. Before she died, she said she would leave me 2 estates and several shops registered under her name. But in my previous life, because I refused to be a substitute bride and my marriage was rushed, my parents never handed over the estates or shops to me. Later, Song Huishu felt that since I had already married, returning home to ask my parents for property would bring shame upon the Song family name. So the matter was dropped and never mentioned again. Now, I am merely reclaiming what is rightfully mine. What's the big deal? My father raged. You ungrateful daughter. When did you develop such a scheming and greedy nature? You. Before he could finish, I slowly straightened my back and looked at them. Once you enter the Marquis household, it's like entering a deep sea. If I were to marry into the Marquis estate, I fear it would be difficult to reunite with father and mother in the future. So father and mother, There's no need to rush your answer. After all, my elder sister won't be marrying into the Jin'an Marquis household for another 3 days. There's no hurry. With that, I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard the furious shouts of several people. But those words could no longer hurt me in the slightest. Let them curse all they want. That evening, I don't know how their discussion went, but Su Mayan found me, unable to maintain her feigned look of vulnerability and helplessness any longer. She raged furiously. Su Huizhu. Don't push your luck. My things, I'd rather throw them away to feed the dogs than let you have them. I swatted away her finger, which had nearly jabbed into my face. I suppose you've made up your mind to marry into the Jin'an Marquis household. Well then. Your younger sister offers her congratulations in advance. My defiance made her eyes widen in shock. I grew up in the countryside. When I suddenly returned to the capital, my parents found my temperament too wild. Day in and day out. They either frowned and scolded me or locked me away to punish me by making me copy the women's code of conduct. Over the course of 2 years, I reined in my temper and turned myself into a meek, invisible presence. In my previous life, I refused to take someone else's place in marriage. On one hand, I thought my parents were foolish if the truth came out. Disaster would surely follow. On the other hand, I didn't want my life to be hidden away in a Marquis household, never seeing the light of day. I wanted to fight for myself at least once, but now, I no longer need to restrain myself. Glancing at the shadow outside the window, I said casually, don't even think about scheming to send me to the Marquis mansion. At worst, they'll expose my true identity and make a scene before the emperor, then our whole family will die together. With you all by my side, I suppose the road to the underworld won't be so lonely, will it? After saying this, I couldn't help but let out a soft chuckle. Back then, Su Mayan, in her quest to climb the social ladder, had stumbled headfirst into the spring water pond at a flower viewing banquet hosted by the wife of the Chancellor of the Imperial Academy. The Crown Prince of Jin'an had saved her by chance, and the current Lady of Jin'an used the excuse that they had already shared physical intimacy to arrange their engagement. At the time, to give the Su family a satisfactory explanation, the Lady of Jin'an had even made a special trip to the palace to inform the Empress Dowager, who subsequently issued an imperial edict formalizing the engagement. At the time, my father was quite smug, believing it was a sign of the Marquis household's esteem for him. Little did he know that times would change, now that they wished to call off the engagement. Isn't that tantamount to deceiving the emperor and betraying the throne? My smile hadn't faded when my mother suddenly burst through the door. Before I could react, she raised her hand and slapped me across the face. Su Huizhu, how could I have raised such a money-grubbing little monster? For a pittance, you're willing to drag the whole family down with you. Could you be any more vicious? My mother didn't hold back on that slap. Half my face went numb, but when I looked up, I saw Su Linyuan gazing at me with smug satisfaction. I wasn't about to put up with this. Bound by filial piety, I couldn't strike back at my mother, but surely I could hit her. Without hesitation, I swung my arm around and slapped Su Linyuan across the face. Caught off guard, she was sent tumbling to the ground. Seeing this, my mother was both shocked and furious. She screamed and lunged at Su Mayan. Just as I turned to hurl a torrent of abuse at her, I saw her staring at me with an icy glare and saying, "If it comes to it, they'll go and shout to the world right now that you're planning to swap brides. We'll all die together. How does that sound, Mother?" Perhaps they were truly afraid I'd drag the whole family down with me, because for the next 3 days, they remained quiet. On the day of the wedding, since I was to observe the widow's mourning period upon entering the household, neither the Marquis mansion nor the Su family held a grand ceremony, though they had carefully chosen an auspicious time for my arrival. As the wedding palanquin neared the Su residence, I hadn't yet finished dressing or applying my makeup. My mother was frantic with anxiety, urging me incessantly, "Why aren't you ready yet? The people from the Marquis mansion are here. How long do you expect them to wait?" I combed my hair leisurely. "There's no rush. How can there be no rush? The people from the Marquis mansion are already at the street corner. How much longer do you plan to dawdle? As she spoke, she reached out to help me comb my hair. I dodged her hand. How is this my fault? Mother hasn't gone over the dowry with me yet. I thought there was still plenty of time. You, my mother's hands trembled with anger. But her evasive gaze gave her away. It seems they don't believe I'd dare to truly break ties with them and drag the whole family to our deaths. I'm not worried that they'll cheat on Su Mayan's dowry. After all, several months ago, father and mother had already displayed her dowry in the courtyard for relatives and friends to inspect. Representatives from the Marquis mansion were present at that dowry display. Given how much my father values his reputation, if he were to cheat, it would only be on minor items. She wouldn't dare tamper with the major pieces. So what I need to verify is the dowry they, as my parents, prepared for my marriage, as well as the farmland and shops my grandmother left me in my previous life. Fearing that Su Mayan would have a hard time at the Marquis residence, my mother gave her most of her personal savings in addition to the dowry she had originally prepared. But Su Mayan remained insatiable. She wept as she selected most of the items from my dowry, claiming she wanted them as mementos. My mother knew full well that Su Mayan resented me for refusing to take her place in the marriage. Yet she still opened the trunks and gave her everything. As a result, not only was my entire dowry cobbled together at the last minute for my wedding, but when it was unpacked, I discovered it consisted of nothing but worthless trinkets. Song Wishu's mother came from a merchant family. Although their fortunes had declined after Song Wishu's father passed away early, she was no stranger to fine things. Because my dowry was so meager, I endured her scornful glances and torment for the first few years after marrying into the Song family. She would often belittle me with snide remarks. You really were raised in the country, city, are not fit to be seen in public. Your parents are nothing but social climbers. They promised to betroth their eldest daughter to my Huai Shu. But when they finally climbed the social ladder, they sent someone like you to fill the spot. You're truly despicable. My father and Song Wishu's father were close friends from school. Back then, my mother and Song Wishu's mother were due around the same time, so the two of them simply decided on a childhood engagement on a whim. Originally, Su Mayan was supposed to be engaged to Song Wishu. But after she schemed her way into a marriage with the Jin'an Marquis household, her engagement to the Song family was nullified. My father didn't want to be labeled a man of his word, so he had me take her place in the engagement with the Song family. It just so happened that Song Huishu came to visit while on his way to the capital to take the imperial examinations, and I had only recently returned to the Su household. Coaxed by my parents, I ended up meeting him and sealing the engagement without fully understanding what was happening. Now that Su Mayan doesn't want to marry into the Marquis household and live as a widow, they're pushing me forward to take her place. Do they really think I'm such an easy pushover? It seems mother and father also think I shouldn't marry into the Marquis household in my sister's place. Well, that works out perfectly. Chun Tang, take these mourning clothes to the eldest young lady. Before I could finish, my mother, furious, hurled a ledger at me. Here, take it all, take it all. How could I have given birth to such a greedy, ungrateful wretch like you? Chun Tang picked up the ledger and handed it to me. I flipped through it. It was indeed the dowry she had prepared for me. In high spirits, I told Chun Tang to put the ledger away. When we leave later, make sure to check everything carefully with the people from the Marquis mansion. Don't let mother's good intentions go to waste. Yes, Chun Tang was the personal maid my grandmother had chosen for me. She grew up with me, though not sisters. We were closer than any sisters. Regarding my parents' decision to have me take the place of the bride in the Marquis household, she was the one who spoke out most passionately on my behalf and felt the deepest sorrow for me. That's why, when it came to asking my parents for my dowry, she was even more attentive than I was. When my mother heard that I wanted the Marquis household staff to help count the dowry items, her face turned as dark as the bottom of a pot. She then gave a subtle nod to her personal matron, who swiftly slipped out along the wall. I guessed she must have gone to help me sort through the dowry. Meanwhile, the The people from the Marquis mansion were strutting about outside the courtyard, impatiently urging us to prepare the trousseau. As soon as my mother heard this, she tried to drag me off to change clothes immediately. I remained unmoved, furious and exasperated. She finally pulled out a stack of deeds and tossed them at me. "Are you satisfied now?" I flipped through the deeds and sighed. Not entirely. Mother didn't even leave her daughter any silver to keep in the bottom of the chest. The deeds were in order, so I put them away. When I looked up, I saw my mother pointing a trembling finger at me. "What else do you want?" I held out my hand toward her. 500 taels in banknotes. With a generous dowry and 500 taels in banknotes tucked away, I stepped into the wedding palanquin bound for the Marquis of Jin'an's mansion. But just before I climbed in, I was surprised to spot Song Huishu among the wedding guests. He stood with his eyes cast down amidst the crowd, Su Mayan by his side. The two of them were deep in conversation. His expression was gentle and tender, just like when we were together in my previous life. Could he possibly have mistaken Su Mayan for me? Although we look alike, I'm a bit taller than her and have darker skin. Logically, he shouldn't have made that mistake. But when I saw his right hand unconsciously rubbing his left wrist, my heart skipped a beat. In my previous life, on his way to take up the post of Chancellor of Yongzhou, Song Huishu had been ambushed by bandits. When he was rescued, his left hand had been left disabled due to prolonged binding. Though it hadn't required amputation, his movement was restricted. So he developed the habit of rubbing his wrist whenever he had a spare moment. But the Song Huishu before me had not been attacked by bandits, nor had his left wrist ever been injured. Why, then, was he doing this? Feeling my gaze, Song Huishu looked up, his brows slightly furrowed, his gaze deep and familiar. In that instant, it was as if I could see the Song Huishu of many years hence through the crowd, and hear his words of bitter resentment, each one piercing my heart. "You and Linyuan are worlds apart. If you hadn't begged me so desperately back then, how could Linyuan and I have wasted half our lives? I've already granted you a lifetime of splendor. Being a concubine is a favor bestowed upon you. What more do you have to complain about?" In my previous life, he disregarded the bond wedge shared for half a lifetime, cast aside propriety, integrity, and the law, all to demote his wife to a concubine. It seems he was madly in love with Su Mayan. Well then, in this life, I wish them both to have their heart's desires fulfilled. With just a single glance, as I calmly withdrew my gaze, I also caught a glimpse of him turning his face away in aloofness. I knew he had returned as well, but just like me, he had chosen a life entirely different from the one we lived in our past lives. And that is for the best. I was carried into the Marquis of Jin'an's mansion through the back gate. I was treated as less than a concubine, but it didn't matter. The Marquis of Jin'an's family name would likely be extinguished before long, so I saw no point in holding a grudge against them. Once inside the mansion, after winding through the corridors, I was led to the Huo family ancestral hall. There, I paid my respects before the spirit tablet of Huo Linyuan, the heir apparent of the Marquis of Jin'an. In my previous life, Su Linyuan had been married to the Marquis of Jin'an for less than half a year when news of a victory reached the border. It was reported that the Marquis heir had previously feigned death on the battlefield. In reality, he had infiltrated the Khitan ranks to coordinate a joint assault from within and without, ultimately recapturing 6 cities: Yun, Wei, Wu, Xin, Ru, and Gui from the 16 states of Yun that had been ceded. This was truly an unparalleled feat in the history of the Great Qi dynasty over the past century. Alas, his old ailment flared up on his triumphant return, and he passed away. In the end, the glory fell upon Su Linyuan and Huo Linyuan's younger brother, Huo Linyuan. Su Linyuan was granted the title of first-rank noble lady and personally appointed by the emperor as Lady Dujin. Huo Linyuan inherited the Jin'an Marquisate, with his title elevated from hereditary with demotion to hereditary without demotion. But in my previous life, when I was exiled to Shuazhou with Song Huishu, I heard that the reason Huo Linyuan's old ailment flared up was because the Marquis' wife, Lady Yang, had instructed Huo Linyuan to harm him. Since we were married while wearing mourning attire, there was no veil, and I saw Lady Yang for the first time. In my previous life, to free Su Mayan from the Marquis household, Song Huishu began investigating the dark secrets of the Jin'an Marquis estate shortly after arriving in the capital. That is how I learned that Lady Yang was not Huo Linyuan's biological mother, but his maternal aunt. Madame Yang and the Marquis of Jin'an had secretly fathered a son, Huo Linyuan. Even before Huo Linyuan's mother, Princess Anyang, had passed away. The two brothers were less than 2 years apart in age. Later, when Princess Anyang was 8 months pregnant, she unexpectedly discovered that the Marquis of Jin'an and Madame Yang had another household elsewhere. Enraged, she suffered a difficult childbirth and died. After Princess Anyang's death, Madame Yang smoothly entered the mansion and became the Marquis of Jin'an's second wife. From then on, she made Huo Linyuan her top priority in everything she did, doting on him and indulging his every whim. Everyone said she was better than a biological mother. Yet little did they know that all her schemes were merely intended to flatter Huo Linyuan to his ruin, compounded by Su Muyuan's deliberate fall into the water to advance her own prospects. Lady Yang seized the opportunity to arrange a marriage with the Su familia family of humble origins, not only severing Huo Linyuan's ties to his maternal family's support, but also breaking his vow to the one he loved. Huo Linyuan hated her beyond measure. Now, seated in her high place, she looked at me with a faint smile. Yet her eyes betrayed an unmistakable contempt. I understood her. After all, how many women, forced by their parents to marry into another family only to become widows, are truly loved by their parents? If even her own parents didn't love her, why would anyone else? Of course, whether she likes me or not doesn't matter to me. What I do care about is whether she'll really do as Su Mayan said, demand I hand over my dowry the very next day after the wedding. Madame Yang presided over my wedding ceremony, which felt more like a funeral, with kindness and forbearance. That evening, I was settled in Li Garden, a distance away from the main courtyard. Madame Li had already prepared the room. When she saw me return, she wiped away her tears and came to greet me. "You've suffered so much." Second young lady. She was my wet nurse. Back in the countryside, aside from my grandmother, she was the one who cared for me the most. When I first came to the capital, it happened to be right after her mother's passing. Since my parents only allowed me to bring one maid with me, I brought Chuntang. However, when she learned recently that my wedding date had been set, she hurried over. In the 2 years since I came to the capital, I've set up a herbal medicine shop on the outskirts of the city and purchased a country estate. Auntie Li's son, Zhou Quan, has been managing everything for me. And before I married into the Marquis household, she helped out at the herbal shop. But now that I have more important matters to attend to, I've brought her along to the Marquis residence. I squeezed Matron Li's hand and gave her a wink. Nanny, am not struggling. On the contrary, this might be a chance granted to me by heaven. Have my foster brother help me get these matters settled as soon as possible. In my previous life, Song Huishu used the death of Princess Anyang as his entry point to bring down the Jin'an Marquis household. Back then, when Princess Anyang suffered a difficult childbirth, Lady Yang had tampered with the process. The Marquis mansion purged a number of people at the time, but they overlooked the midwife who had attended the prince's delivery, as well as 2 young maidservants. My plan now is to find the witnesses and physical evidence that can incriminate Lady Yang in advance, so that when Huo Linyuan returns, I can hold a favor over him. As for how he chooses to handle it, that is his business. Having been reborn, marrying into a noble family is not my only option. But to escape the prison that is the Jin'an Marquis estate, I have no choice but to cooperate with Huo Linyuan. If he owes me a favor, I'll be in a better position to negotiate terms, so I must prepare some bargaining chips in advance. The next day, according to protocol, I had a family recognition ceremony. But since this was a marriage to a widower seeking a wife, the only relatives in attendance were from the Jin'an Marquis estate. Apart from the Marquis and the Marquise, the only relatives present were Huo Linyuan's younger brother, Huo Linyuan, and his two younger sisters, Huo Linyuan and Huo Lingxing. After I had served tea, the Marquis of Jin'an took his leave, and Lady Yang presented me with a pair of bracelets of average quality. I, in turn, gave the three siblings Huo Linyuan and his sisters the gifts I had prepared earlier as tokens of our meeting. Huo Linyuan was about 18 or 19 years old, with a pair of alluring, almond-shaped eyes. He had dark circles under his eyes and a flirtatious look in his gaze. As he accepted the gift Chun Tang handed him, he subtly brushed against her, then addressed me, "Sister-in-law, you're just as lovely and charming as I am. I wonder if you've been betrothed yet. What nonsense are you spouting? She's a member of your elder sister's household. You have no right to meddle. Do you understand?" Madame Yang gave Huo Linyuan a light tap, lifting her hand high before gently lowering it. "Hui Zhu. Don't take him seriously. He's just been spoiled at home and has no sense of his place in the world. But he means no harm. If you need anything, just call on him. Thank you for your advice, Mother." I shot Huo Linyuan a glance. In my previous life, Su Yuan said that Huo Linyuan had taken advantage of her the very next day after she married into the Huo family. Judging by his demeanor, he certainly seemed the type capable of such a thing. Feeling my gaze, Huo Linyuan gave me a flirtatious wink. Madame Yang gave him another slap, and only then did he feign pain and run off. Afterward, I presented two identical filigree butterfly and flower gold hairpins differing only in the color of their inlaid gems to Huo Linyuan and Huo Lingxing, respectively, though the two were publicly presented as twins. Huo Lingxing was actually the child born of a difficult delivery to Princess Anyang. Lady Yang had neglected her care. She wore a worn, pale yellow gown. Though tall, she was thin, making the dress hang loosely on her like a drape, utterly ill-fitting, with no jewelry in her hair. She stood there with downcast eyes, appearing timid and fearful, yet when those eyes met mine, they shone with startling intensity. In contrast, Huo Linyuan was dressed far more lavishly, and her figure was fuller and rounder. However, she had inherited her mother's stature, so she was much shorter than Huo Lingxing. When I presented her with the hairpin, her eyes lit up for a moment, but after glancing at it just twice, she had her maid put it away, as if she didn't care about it at all. Huo Lingxing, on the other hand, thanked me in a soft, delicate voice and carefully put the hairpin away. "Pfft, is it really that big of a deal? Just a hairpin, and she's treating it like a treasure." Seeing how careful she was, Huo Linyuan snorted coldly, though a fleeting glimpse of greed flashed in her eyes. Huo Lingxing glanced at me in panic, then pressed her lips together and lowered her gaze. It was then that I noticed the warm white pearl hairpin pinned at her temple. A sudden realization struck me. She was observing a period of mourning for Huo Linyuan. I was taken aback. Could it be that she already knew at that time that her birth mother was the Princess of Anyang? No wonder. After she married the fifth prince, helped him ascend the throne, and became empress herself, she allowed Song Huishu to conduct a thorough investigation of the Jin'an Marquis estate. Otherwise, relying solely on Song Huishu to bring down the Jin'an Marquis estate would have been nothing but a pipe dream. It's just a pity that not long before I died, Huo Lingxing passed away due to childbirth complications. However, I was surprised to overhear Song Huishu mentioning Huo Lingxing in a conversation with a retainer, learning that her death might not have been as simple as childbirth complications, but rather the emperor clearing the path for his cousin, the imperial consort. She was a pitiful soul. 2. Upon hearing Huo Linyuan's words, Madame Yang pretended to be angry and gave her a gentle twist before turning to me. "Don't listen to your sister Linyuan's nonsense. She's just a loose-lipped girl. Plus, after managing the household finances for me all these years, she's gained a bit of insight and now thinks she can look down on everything." As she spoke, she patted my hand, her smile growing even warmer and more affectionate. "You Now that you've married into the Marquis household, our family, since you have such a substantial dowry. If there's anything about the accounts you don't understand, feel free to ask your younger sister Linyu, or have her help you manage the estates and shops. It'll save you the trouble. Hearing this, I feigned surprise. Mother, are you suggesting I hand over my dowry to Sister Linyu? Madame Yang hadn't expected me to be so clueless. Speaking as bluntly as a wooden mallet, she choked on her words for a moment before forcing out a strained smile. What are you saying? Hui Zhu. I meant for your sister to help you. How did that turn into giving her your dowry? We can eat whatever we like, but we mustn't speak carelessly. Back when the old Marquis was still alive, he became obsessed with gambling and nearly mortgaged the entire Jin'an Marquisate estate. Had the current Marquis not married Princess Anyang, the Jin'an Marquisate would likely have ceased to exist long ago. However, before Princess Anyang passed away, she entrusted her dowry to the current Empress Dowager for safekeeping, leaving instructions that half of it should be handed over to Huo Linyuan only after he came of age, while the other half was to be reserved for Huo Linyuan. Consequently, without Princess Anyang's dowry to prop things up and with Lady Yang bringing little of her own life at the Jin'an Marquisate grew straitened and difficult once again after she married into the family. But in another 2 years, Huo Linyuan will also reach marriageable age. So it's no wonder Lady Yang has set her sights on my dowry. I smiled. So that's how it is. Well, that works out perfectly. Yesterday I had my wet nurse go to the magistrate's office to sign the dowry contract on my behalf. And I told her to bring it to Mother for review today. Just as I was speaking, Chun Tang handed me a box. I opened it to find a list of my dowry items inside, but it bore an official seal, and beneath it lay a stack of land deeds. I took out the list and handed it to her. If you'd like to help me manage it, then I'll be able to take it easy. Nothing could be better. At my words, Madame Yang and Huo Linyu's faces turned as dark as the bottom of a pot. Huo Linyu was the first to lose her composure, shrieking, "How dare you register it with the authorities?" I looked puzzled. My dowry, am I not allowed to register it? Huo Linyuan was so furious she nearly grabbed my face. But fortunately, Madame Yang retained enough composure to hold her back. She wasn't much better, though, snapping, "Since you've come to observe mourning for the governor of Linchuan, you'll start by copying the Sutra of the Deceased for a month in the ancestral hall." Did she think that by using this to pressure me, I would give in? Little did she expect that I would respond calmly and peacefully with a simple yes. It was clear that Madame Yang was furious. But so what? Once the two of them had left, Huo Linyuan, who had been huddled in the corner, timidly called out to me, "Sister-in-law." I pretended not to notice the fleeting look of inquiry and scrutiny in her eyes and beckoned her over. "Sister-in-law," she said, approaching me somewhat shyly. I took her hand, my gaze lingering on the pearl hairpin at her temple. "I have a set of pearl jewelry back at my quarters. It would suit you perfectly." At my words, she paused slightly, then lowered her eyes. I suspect she realized I was already aware of her intention to observe mourning for Huo Linyuan. In my previous life, when I entered the palace as a noblewoman to pay my respects, I had seen her before. She was an exceptionally refined and intelligent woman. Without her support in both the imperial court and the harem, the fifth prince, that mere figurehead, would never have ascended the throne. Yet all her sacrifices brought her nothing but an untimely death. "Would you like to come see me?" I paused for a moment before tentatively asking her. She looked at me for a moment, then let go of my hand. Her voice was soft yet distinctly distant. "No, thank you, sister-in-law. I still have some homework to finish today." Hearing this, I knew she wasn't as close to me as I had imagined. Moreover, when I tested her, unable to fathom my intentions, she instinctively went on the defensive. Her caution was genuine, but it also tugged at my heartstrings. To possess such a mindset before even reaching the age of maturity, I can't imagine how she managed to get through her childhood. Sigh. Since she didn't wish to grow close to me, I naturally wouldn't force the issue. After exchanging a few more words, we went our separate ways. Afterward, Lady Yang had someone watch over me as I copied the Sutra of the Pure Land in the ancestral hall, assuming I'd come begging her within 2 days. But to her surprise, I remained completely silent for half a month. She flew into a rage and immediately sent word that she was unwell, ordering me to attend to her the next day. What kind of elder is she? She tried to seize my dowry the very next day after the wedding. Why on earth should Miss go tend to her? That evening, while Lian Xiao was helping me wash up, she whispered her complaints to Chun Tang. Chun Tang quickly stopped her. "Shoo, you mustn't say such things within the Marquis mansion. If word gets out that the young lady is unfilial, you'll be in for it." Lian Xiao stuck out her tongue. Just as Auntie Li hurried in from the doorway, "Young lady, the people from Linen have arrived. They're staying at the country estate. But Mr. Sui will be a few days late, still needs to settle the accounts for a few shops." When I was in Linen, my grandmother had let me try my hand at managing a few of the shops under her name. Over the course of a few years, I used the profits from those shops to buy up an entire street. That allowed me to earn some money and cultivate a few capable people. Now that I've married into the Marquis household, I have many tasks to handle. I can't manage without staff. So I've asked my foster brother to bring over everyone from Linen who's willing to come to the capital. It's fine. He'll make his own arrangements. Tomorrow, they'll go see Instructor Cheng and the others first. Qingwen and Qinglu are 2 brothers from a martial arts school on the same street as our old family home in Linchuan. We've known each other since childhood. In my previous life, when their school was on the verge of closing, I recommended them to Song Huishu. Both are exceptionally skilled in martial arts. On several occasions when we were in danger, they were the ones who protected me and Song Huishu. So in this life, I had Brother Dazhou make a special trip to invite them. I hadn't held out much hope that they'd come, but to my surprise, they agreed immediately. Upon hearing I needed help, they followed me without a second thought. As the host, I naturally must go meet them tomorrow. But what about Lady Ho? Chun Tang hesitated. I replied casually, "Tie up Huo Linyuan and give her a beating. It'll make her life miserable too. Then she won't have time to bother me. Will she?" Lian Xiao immediately stepped forward. "That's a great idea. They'll go handle it with Brother Cheng and the others." Chun Tang hurriedly objected. "What if people from the home mansion come to bully us while you're gone? They'll see who dares." Lian Qiu's almond-shaped eyes widened as she was about to unleash a tirade. But I held her back and laughed. "Go on. Go on. You've been cooped up for half a month. You're bursting with energy." Lian Xiao was born with superhuman strength. When her brother and sister-in-law sold her into a brothel, she nearly tore half the place down. After I rescued her, I sent her to study martial arts, so she's my best shield, capable of both offense and defense. I hadn't originally planned to bring her into the Marquis mansion, but Huo Linyuan's behavior at the family reunion banquet left me with no choice but to arrange a powerful bodyguard for myself. What surprised me, however, was that Huo Linyuan didn't sneak into the Li courtyard on his second night of marriage, as Su Mayan had claimed. And the people I'd sent to keep an eye on him followed him for a few days and discovered that he seemed to be constantly inquiring about events surrounding Huo Linyuan's death. Could it be that he has already discovered the truth about Huo Linyuan's fake death? Just as I was pondering this, I heard Auntie Li say, "By the way, second young master Huo seems to want to go to the border. He's been to the Ministry of War several times in the past couple of days." At dawn the next day, the gatekeeper began shouting at the top of his lungs. It turned out that Huo Linyuan had been beaten to a pulp and dumped at the doorstep. When I went to pay my respects to Madame Yang, she was cursing the man who'd beaten Huo Linyuan, her voice choked with tears. Seeing me at the door, she had no tact whatsoever and asked me where I was feeling unwell. Enraged, her hands trembled as she berated me and then chased me away. I took the opportunity to slip out of the Lord's mansion through the back gate. An unassuming carriage with blue curtains carried me all the way to the outskirts. It was a spring day in March, with flowers in full bloom, and young lords and ladies out enjoying the countryside everywhere. I lifted the curtain to look outside. A gentle breeze carried the fresh scent of earth and grass to my face. I took a deep breath. It was truly refreshing, but then I unexpectedly spotted a familiar face. I let the curtain fall, with a sigh of annoyance. Yet I was also curious. What was Song Huishu doing out here in the countryside? A spring outing. In my previous life, wasn't he completely absorbed in his studies, unwilling to be distracted in the slightest? Auntie Lee had also spotted Song Huishu. After he had walked a good distance away, she suddenly remarked, "Miss, it seems that young Master Song has been inquiring about Mr. Sui." Song Huishu. In my previous life, after I married Song Huishu, the very first thing I did was invite Master Sui to the capital. He had passed the imperial examination in the 6th year of the Xuanda era, but his entire clan was demoted due to a grain tax corruption scandal in Heshi Commandery. He broke his leg on the way to Liangzhou, which completely derailed his political career. However, he was particularly well-versed in policy essays and criminal law. With his help, Song Huishu was able to pass the provincial examination on his first attempt, and during his years in provincial service, he rose smoothly through the ranks to become a prefect. Later, upon returning to the capital, it was also thanks to Mr. Sui's support that he was able to rise from Vice Minister of War all the way to the position of Chancellor. So, having been reborn, his first thought was to find Mr. Sui, his right-hand man, which showed he still had some sense. Madame Li had once secretly visited Song Huishu and commented on his appearance, deeming him barely worthy of me. But now that she learned he had finalized his engagement with Su Mayan, she found fault with everything about him. "It's definitely him." The other day, Zhou Degao brought 2 cartloads of medicinal herbs back to the estate, and that Song guy went straight over to him. I don't know where he even met Zhou Degao, but he called him by his full name and said he wanted to make Zhou Degao his chief steward. Pfft, that blind, heartless bastardos if he's worthy. In my previous life, my wet nurse didn't come with me to the Song household, mainly because the house was too small to accommodate her. Toward the end of the year I married into the Song family. Song Huishu's mother took a fall and injured her back, so she handed over the management of the household to me. But the Song family really didn't have much to begin with, just a few acres of poor, leased farmland and 2 small shops that barely broke even. After I took over, I quickly turned the situation around. I used my own money to cover the shortfalls and gradually took over a few more shops. And only then did the Song family's fortunes truly begin to improve. For convenience, I asked my foster brother to help me manage the shops. I just didn't tell Song Huishu his true identity, so he wouldn't feel self-conscious. But I never expected that he would think Big Zhou had become the Song family's chief manager because of him. In his previous life, Master Sui helped him strategize in the bureaucracy, while Big Zhou earned a steady stream of silver to support his political maneuvering. That's how he achieved his great accomplishments. I suspect that his trip to the outskirts this time was an attempt to find familiar faces and recreate the dazzling life he had in his previous life. Chunyu frowned. Why would he go to the estate to look for Master Sui? Hasn't Master Sui stayed out of the capital for many years now? After Master Sui lost the use of his leg, he fell into a state of despair for a while. Later, he simply gave up on life and started begging on the streets. In the end, he nearly starved to death at my doorstep before I took him in. After that, when grandmother put me in charge of the shop, it was thanks to his guidance that I was able to sail smoothly and achieve all those successes. In my previous life, after I brought him to the capital, I settled him at that country estate we'd recently purchased. I then persuaded Song Huishu to accompany me on a spring outing where we happened to run into him. Master Sui offered him a few words of advice, and he was deeply inspired. After that, he often sought Master Sui out to study under him. Once he passed the imperial examinations, he immediately invited Master Sui back to the Song family to serve as a private tutor. Song Huishu must have assumed, based on his experience from my previous life, that Master Sui was living at that country estate. But in this life, he's in for a disappointment. I went to the estate to brief everyone on my upcoming plans. so they'd all have a clear idea of what to expect. After all, Huo Linyuan is too much of a wild card, so I've sent Brother Qingguan to follow him. If he heads for the border, Brother Qingguan is to go with him. If he were to make a move against Huo Linyuan, I ordered him to tie Huo Linyuan up and hand him over to Huo Linyuan. As for the others, I instructed them to immediately take stock of all the assets under my name, including the cash that could be withdrawn from my dowry and any items that could be sold off quickly for cash, as I had a major use for them. A few days later, Mr. Sui arrived in the capital, without even taking a day's rest. He began helping me tally up my assets, and in the end, we managed to scrape together nearly 20,000 taels of silver. I really am wealthy. No. That's not quite right. I should say my mother was truly generous in saving up Su Muyuan's dowry. Most of that 20,000 in cash came from Su Muyuan's dowry. In mid-June, I had Qingwu escort Master Sui to the border. I felt at ease only after entrusting the negotiations with Huo Linyuan to Master Sui. I just never expected that when I was seeing Mr. Sui off at the city gate, I would run into Song Huishu. Apparently, he was still looking for Mr. Sui. Mr. Sui, I've been searching for you everywhere. How did you end up here? Have you just arrived in the capital? Or are you on your way somewhere? Mr. Sui brushed aside his overly familiar hand and furrowed his brow. And this is? Mr. Sui turned to me and asked. The old master had met Song Huishu before and knew he was looking for him. But he harbored deep resentment towards Song Huishu for standing by idly while my parents forced me into a marriage of convenience with the Marquis household, a marriage of convenience with Huo T lifting a finger to stop it, and for hastily arranging an engagement with Su Muyuan. Naturally, he gave him a cold reception. It was only then that Song Huishu noticed me, his face filled with shock. Su Huizhu, how did you end up with Master Sui? And Qinggu? How did he? His shock was genuine. I sneered inwardly but feigned innocence. What on earth are you talking about? Brother-in-law. Master Sui and Brother Qinggu both came here with me from Linen. Now that they're setting off on a long journey, what's wrong with me seeing them off? Linen. Song Huishu's expression shifted rapidly, and finally, pointing at me, he growled through clenched teeth. Have you come back too, Su Huizhu? No wonder back then, so that's how it is. So that's how it is. Speak. What exactly did you say to the master? Why are you hiding him? As he spoke, he lunged at me in a fit of rage, only to be kicked flying by Lian Xiao before he could even touch me. Pa, how dare you lay a hand on our young lady? Seeing this, Qingwu rubbed his arms and gave Lian Xiao a thumbs up. Song Huishu, who was originally set to retire this year, decided to wait another 3 years because he hadn't found Master Sui. At the end of August, Song Huishu and Su Mayan were married. In mid-September, good news arrived from the border. Huo Linyuan had recaptured 6 lost cities in the 16 states of Yanyuan and returned triumphantly to the capital. At that moment, Madame Yang, who had been observing a vegetarian diet and chanting sutras for half a year to pray for Huo Linyuan's safety, nearly smashed the small Buddhist shrine. The next day, one of her maids packed her belongings and, under the pretext of visiting family, quietly slipped out of the Marquis mansion. Her destination was none other than the frontier. At the same time, I sent a letter to Mr. Sui and the others. In my previous life, when I was exiled to Shuazhou with Song Huishu, I heard many stories about Huo Linyuan's recapture of the border. Even before he faked his death, he was a figure the Khitan feared greatly. Later, his counterattack penetrating deep into enemy territory to coordinate with internal forces was nothing short of unstoppable, defeating any foe that stood in his way. However, during the Battle of Gui Prefecture, he nearly starved to death inside the besieged city due to a severe shortage of provisions and was gravely wounded as a result. That is why I sent Mr. Sui to Yu Prefecture, which borders Gui Prefecture, to deliver all the provisions and medicinal supplies we had stockpiled over the past few months. These supplies played a crucial role in Huo Linyuan's campaign at Gui Prefecture, enabling him to successfully reclaim the lost territory while also ensuring his survival. Of course, the This also allowed Mr. Sui to successfully get close to Huo Linyuan. By now, he must have figured out that I'm the unlucky soul who married while clutching his spirit tablet. Right. As for Mr. Sui, since Huo Linyuan used an alias, Mr. Sui simply pretended not to know his true identity. Now that he's used Huo Linyuan's identity to report the victory, as long as I ensure he isn't poisoned by Huo Linyuan and provide him with evidence of the Yang family's attempt to poison Princess Anyang, that should be enough to secure my freedom. Right. Preparing those provisions and medicinal supplies cost me a pretty penny, so from now on, I'll have to save up diligently and plan for my own future. But I never expected that as soon as the news of Huo Linyuan's victory reached us from the frontier, my mother would rush to find me. Hoping I could trade places with Su Mayan. The Song family isn't a decent family at all. Song Wish's mother has been complaining day in and day out about the meager dowry your sister brought. If you hadn't been so greedy back then, she wouldn't have ended up. Seeing me look at her with a half smile, my mother didn't finish her sentence. Are you asking me to help support my sister? I asked. She fidgeted, rubbing her hands together, then finally steeled herself and said, Your sister has been raised a bit too innocently by us. You grew up in the countryside. You should be best equipped to handle someone like Mrs. Song. Why don't you switch places with your sister? I raised an eyebrow at her, gesturing for her to continue. Her eyes lit up, and she went on. After all, you aren't close to the general, and Huai Shu is deeply in love with you. It was our folly to let you take your sister's place in this Marquis mansion. We've only ended up harming both of you. Before she could finish, she began wiping away tears, watching her hypocritical, desperate expression. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. They say a parent's love for a child is far-sighted. Mother, you've truly spared no effort for your sister. My mother gave a dry laugh. Isn't all this for your sake? Think about it, your sister was engaged to the crown prince back then because they fell in love at first sight, wasn't she? How could he possibly fail to recognize your sister? Besides, you aren't close to the crown prince. What if the truth comes out? He's returned victorious now and is in the emperor's favor. If this matter were to reach the imperial court, it wouldn't just be you, your father, and even the entire Su family would likely suffer the consequences. After that, she lectured me earnestly for quite a while, recounting many instances of how Su Mayan had been tormented by her mother-in-law while living with the Song family. As she spoke, tears welled up in her eyes again. You have no idea, the very next day after your sister was married, her mother-in-law started laying down the law. On the day she returned to our home, she looked as if she'd aged several years. She'd lost all the liveliness she had at home. She was just like an old woman. Seeing her like that, my heart nearly broke. My mother went on and on about Su Mayan's plight. It was clear she truly felt for her. But when I returned to my parents' home in my previous life, I merely mentioned in passing that Mrs. Song had asked me to serve her a meal by the time I sat down to eat. The food had gone cold. My mother specifically summoned Song Huishuan, right in front of him, accused me of being overly sensitive, of having no manners, and of being too-faced, claiming I wasn't sincerely serving my mother-in-law. She told Song Huishu to teach me a lesson so as not to bring shame upon his family. Song Huishu listened with a grim expression, and for over half a month after we returned home, he wouldn't give me a friendly look. In my previous life, I thought my mother was simply too strict, hoping I wouldn't make any missteps in my in-law home. But later I realized she was just strict with me. In the end, she pleaded with me again. Hui Zhu, please help your sister. Seeing her like that, I felt even more disheartened and replied listlessly, let me think about it. Afterward, I made an excuse that I was tired and had Chun Tang see her out. Even though she was reluctant to leave, I didn't try to keep her. Chun Tang said she left in a huff. In the past, I might have taken it to heart, but now I just thought, what does it have to do with me? Later, I sent a message to Song Huishu, briefly explaining that my mother had asked me to switch places with Su Muyuan. In his previous life, All he ever wanted was to marry Su Mayan. Now that he's finally fulfilled that wish in this life, how could he possibly let her go? Let him and Su Mayan sort that out themselves. I couldn't care less about getting involved. But I didn't expect Song Huishu to ask me to meet and talk. He even said that if I didn't go, he'd go to Huo Linyuan himself and tell him about the Su family's decision to exchange brides. I almost laughed out loud. Did he really think this would scare me into submission? He'd better make sure everyone knows about it. What surprised me, though, was that before he could make a scene about the Su family's replacement bride, Su Muyuan fainted right in front of Huo Linyuan's warhorse. Huo Linyuan took Su Muyuan back to the Marquis mansion. I didn't even get to see him before he went into the palace to pay his respects to the emperor. Before long, Su Muyuan found me. Su Huizhu. What good will it do you to marry into the Marquis mansion? The crown prince has already cast you aside the moment he laid eyes on me. I looked at her smug expression and replied nonchalantly, right. You're absolutely right. What kind of attitude is that? She snapped, grinding her teeth in fury. I've told you before what's mine. I'd rather feed to the dogs than give to you. I was at a loss for words. I couldn't quite picture what it would look like to feed Huo Linyuan to a dog, so I just brushed it off with a casual, right. You don't really think Song Huishu is still waiting for you, do you? She covered her mouth and giggled. Then after a moment, lowered her voice to say venomously, you couldn't beat me in your last life. And you certainly won't in this one. He'll always be the one he loves most. I didn't have time to scoff at her claim of Song Huishu's love. I was simply astonished. Had she been reborn too? When did that happen? In the blink of an eye. I furrowed my brows and said calmly, I don't understand what you're talking about. In my previous life, Song Huishu demoted me from wife to concubine, and I fell gravely ill from the shock, knowing my days were numbered. Yet unwilling to let that pair of scoundrels off the hook, I had Lian Xiao knock them unconscious, then set the place ablaze to take them all down with me. On the day I married into the Marquis household, I was certain Song Huishu had been reborn just like me. But Su Muyuan didn't seem like it at all. Could it be that she's just returned? Come to think of it, my mother came to see me a few days ago and said that after Song's mother laid down the rules, she looked as if she'd aged many years upon returning home like an old woman. Could it be that she returned after marrying Song Huishu? In her previous life, she'd stopped at nothing to become Song Huishu's legitimate wife. In this life, she got her wish the moment she opened her ice hall and she'd be overjoyed. So why is she making such a scene? I suspect she thinks being the wife of a marquis is more prestigious than becoming the chancellor's wife after spending most of her life striving for it. Besides, in this life, Song Huishu hasn't even made his debut yet, and it's still uncertain whether he'll pass the imperial exams in 3 years. It's only natural that she doesn't want to wait. Don't play dumb with me. Just because you returned a little earlier than I did, you think you can steal my destiny. You're dreaming. This Marquis mansion is mine and mine alone in this life. Right. But does your brother-in-law know about this? Song Huishu may appear to be a gentleman of impeccable character, but in reality, he's the kind of man who holds a grudge for the slightest offense. In his previous life, when he served as chief of staff in Yongzhou, he made someone's life miserable for half a year simply because they'd been a moment too slow to offer him a toast. It wasn't until the person came begging for mercy that I learned he'd been holding a grudge for so long all over a single cup of wine. He cherishes Su Mayan so deeply. If he finds out she's betrayed him, who knows how he'll exact his revenge. But to my surprise, Su Muyuan let out a scoff. Her eyes suddenly filled with venomous hatred. As for your brother-in-law thinks my dowry is too meager and that I'm of no use to him, he's practically begging for us to swap back. What on earth is she talking about? Didn't she say Song Huishu loved her most? Now she's saying he wants us to swap back one thing one moment, another the next. Isn't she contradicting herself? Just then, Chun Tang rushed in. Miss, the Song family's son-in-law has come to pick up the eldest miss. but he said he'd like to see you first. Speak of the devil, but I really didn't want to see Song Huishu. However, I was curious about when Su Muyuan had returned, so I had Chen Tang lead him to the small flower parlor. At first, Su Mayan went berserk, refusing to let me see Song Huishu. But in the end, she insisted on coming with me. I let her hide behind the screen, and before long, Song Huishu walked in. When he looked at me, his expression was both tender and complex. Huishu. It wasn't until I was away from you that I realized how important you are to me. Will you come back to me? I can't live without you. I dodged his hand as he tried to wrap his arms around me. My face filled with terror. Brother-in-law, what are you talking about? He looked utterly tormented. I know I wronged you in our past life, but I was blinded by that bitch Su Mayan. I truly had no idea you'd done so much for me. Huishu. I'm sorry. I know I was wrong. Will you forgive me? I watched his act with a cold gaze. How could a man like him possibly believe he was in the wrong? Head simply realized that without me, he was nothing, and that's why Head panicked. Just then, a noise came from behind the screen. I sneered inwardly, but my face betrayed sheer panic. Brother-in-law, have you all been possessed? Just now, my sister was saying things I couldn't understand, claiming that whether in this life or the last, you loved her most. How could this be? How could this be? As I spoke, I cautiously glanced toward the screen. Song Huishu's expression darkened, and he strode toward the screen. Then came a loud crash as he knocked the screen over, revealing a terrified Su Mayan behind it. You're right where I need you. If it weren't for your scheming in our past life, how could Huishu have grown so estranged from me? As he spoke, he dragged Su Mayan in front of me and pleaded. Huishu, I know you hate me for being so easily swayed, and for ruining our lifelong bond for her sake, but I, too, was blinded by hurt. That's why I did those foolish things. Even if you want do it for my sake, please do it for the sake of our 2 children. Come back to me. Want you. Song Huishu's display of deep affection made me feel sick to my stomach. In my previous life, whenever Su Muyuan provoked me, he not only shielded her at every turn but even scolded me harshly, accusing me of being petty, mean-spirited, and jealous. But looking back now, he must have known back then that Su Muyuan was trying to drive a wedge between us. So why is it wrong for me to even ask a single question? As for those 2 children, the moment they urged Med'er on Motherto demote my wife to a concubine so Su Mayan could ascend to her position, I considered them all dead. Stupid. Wicked little things. They've squandered the kindness I showed them over a dozen years of raising them. I'd rather have none of them now. I took 2 steps back to put some distance between myself and Song Huishu. But unexpectedly, he closed in on me like a madman. This is the perfect opportunity. If she wants to return to the Marquis mansion, let her go. You come back with me too. Let's submit to heaven's will and each return to our rightful places. Shall we? Huishu. Just as he reached out to grab me, a deep, chilling voice rang out from the doorway. No. I turned and saw a figure standing at the doorway, towering like a small mountain. His imposing stature blocked most of the light. Against the glare, I couldn't make out his features, but the aura of authority radiating from him sent a chill down my spine. His Highness Su Mayan was the first in the room to react. As she spoke, Huo Linyuan stepped into the flower hall, and I caught a clear glimpse of his features. Unlike the heavily made-up, refined beauty of the aristocratic youths in the capital, his skin was dark and weathered. Though well-groomed, the marks left on his face by wind, sand, and battle were still visible. In particular, 2 fresh wounds on his forehead and cheek, still stained with blood, gave him an unmistakable, menacing aura that made one dare not act rashly in his presence. But setting that aside, his superior bone structure endowed him with deep-set features and sharp, upright brows and eyes. Had his skin been just a touch fairer, he would have been the very picture of a handsome young man. No wonder Sumayan had once braved the biting spring chill to jump into the lake and scheme against him. Song Wishu's face turned pale and ashen at Huo Linyuan's appearance. Especially when Huo Linyuan walked up to him, looked at him expressionlessly, and asked, "You want to take my wife? Did you ask me first?" Song Wishu was no stranger to high-stakes situations. But facing Huo Linyuan, a god of war who towered nearly 2 heads above him and had emerged from mountains of corpses and seas of blood, couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Sumu Yuan hadn't expected that, even though Huo Linyuan had brought her back. His words and actions still favored me. Driven by instinct, she blurted out, "But your highness, I am the one betrothed to you." Huo Linyuan shot her a cold glance. "Yet it was your younger sister who married into the Marquis household, was it not?" Sumu Yuan shrank back in fear. Huo Linyuan swept his gaze over her and Song Huishu before continuing. "Since she is willing to remain a widow for me, I, Huo Linyuan, will never betray her in this lifetime." As he spoke, his hawk-like gaze fixed on Song Huishu. "I don't care what you're up to, but you'd better put your schemes aside and stop bothering my wife. Otherwise, don't blame me for being unkind to you." Song Huishu stumbled in fright, nearly falling to the ground. I found it amusing, so I pursed my lips and turned away, only to find myself caught in Huo Linyuan's gaze. He froze for a moment, then cleared his throat and turned his head away as if nothing had happened. How innocent of him! No sooner had he finished warning Song Huishu and his wife than an imperial edict arrived from the palace. Reclaiming lost territories is a service to the state, effective immediately. He is hereby appointed General Rongwei and conferred the title of Duke of Rong, a hereditary title that shall never be revoked. With a fiefdom of 2,000 households, a reward of 10,000 taels of gold, an imperial gift of a general's mansion, and a ceremonial robe. The eunuch delivering the edict recited a long list of honors. Just as I thought he had finished, he suddenly produced another imperial decree. The wife of Grand General Rongwei, Su Huizhu, receive this edict. I was taken aback. Why was I being mentioned? Provisions and medicine at the front are running low, and the situation is dire. You have therefore depleted your personal wealth to aid the military's needs. I hereby bestow upon you the title of Princess of Shunan, with an annual stipend of 400 shur of grain, a residence, and 10,000 taels of silver. I listened in a daze and accepted the imperial edict in a haze. It wasn't until the eunuch delivering the edict had left that I remembered the pouch of silver ingots I'd prepared long ago. So I hurriedly called for Auntie Li to send it to him. The eunuch, who had already been quite pleased with this errand, beamed even wider after feeling the weight of the silver ingots. Before leaving, he even took the trouble to pay Huo Linyuan a compliment. "General, you are truly blessed to have such a virtuous wife as the princess. It is indeed a great fortune." I watched Huo Linyuan's retreating figure with a sense of deep emotion. I had no idea how Master Sui had spoken to him, but to have him bestow such a generous gift upon me before even meeting Mei He really is a kind-hearted man. That evening, Madame Yang hosted a grand welcome banquet for Huo Linyuan. I heard quite a few people attended, and the wine kept being refilled round after round. I lost count of how many times. In any case, by the time Huo Linyuan returned to his Yanran residence, it was already past the 4th watch. Although the general returned to Yanran residence at the hour of the ox, he rose at the 3rd hour of the tiger to practice a sword form, and right now he's out riding at the racecourse. Lian Xiao rattled off Huo Linyuan's schedule with her little mouth. After hearing this, I instructed Chen Tang to have the kitchen prepare some food for him. But just as breakfast was being served here, a servant from his courtyard came running over. "Madam, the general asked me to ask if he may come over here for breakfast." I paused for a moment, a thought flitting through my mind. He's quite forward, isn't he? I didn't know what he intended to discuss by coming over for breakfast today, but I could tell him about my future plans. But when he heard me say that I might fake my death in a while so he could marry the girl of his choice, his expression turned so cold and complex. I felt uneasy. Wasn't he and the second young lady of the Chinese Marquis family childhood sweethearts? If Su Mayan hadn't meddled, wouldn't they have been together long ago, when Huo Linyuan went to the frontier? The second young lady of the Chinese Marquis family never discussed marriage, wasn't she just waiting for him? I'd already investigated this thoroughly. What does his behavior mean? After a long silence, he finally spoke. Feng Lingsu is Feng Can's younger sister. I consider Feng Can a brother. So naturally his sister is also my sister. Moreover, she and the third young master of the Ning family are deeply in love. They sealed their engagement the day before yesterday. Now it was my turn to be speechless. Is that why you're leaving? Not exactly. I paused. Facing Huo Linyuan's calm, piercing gaze, I couldn't help but reveal my future plans. I want to travel and see the world, and in the process, expand my business far and wide. So I won't be confined to this small corner of the inner courtyard, free and prosperous. But I hadn't expected that the more I spoke, the brighter Huo Linyuan's eyes grew, only to dim again as if had suddenly remembered something. When my mother was still alive, my dream was to become a wandering knight. Eating, drinking, and living life to the fullest in the martial world. It's just a pity. His words made my heart tighten, and I hurried to comfort him. There will be opportunities. Don't worry. He gave a wry smile. Now that Daong has just reclaimed its lost territories, some in the court are proposing to press on with the momentum and advance into Khitan territory to avenge the deep-seated grudge of years of oppression. To my surprise, the emperor is quite taken with the idea, now that Huo Linyuan has assumed the position of general of honor and might. He bears a burden he cannot shed. This made my words of comfort seem all the more hollow. So he said, "Then could you tell me about what you've seen and heard in different places?" It'll as if I've been there too. I simply couldn't bear to see him so despondent, so I hastily agreed. No problem. Leave it to me. But at that moment, I still didn't realize I had already fallen into the net he had woven for me. It wasn't until many years later that I belatedly realized. This wasn't his youthful dream at all. It was clearly the string of a kite that held me captive. No matter where I went or how far I traveled, I couldn't help but think of him. Longing to share my experiences with him, it truly tugged at my heartstrings and weighed heavily on my mind. Huo Linyuan. Side story. My older brother died, and my mother married him off to a widow who was waiting for a husband to take her in. That woman schemed against my brother, and now she's mourning him. She deserves it. But I've always felt that my brother isn't really dead, so I want to go to the places he used to be and avenge him. I followed my brother's example and sneaked off to the frontier. On the way, I met a man named Qingwen. He told me his family used to run an escort agency. But after all his elders died on a mission, he and his brother closed the business and opened a martial arts school instead. But the school wasn't doing well, so he joined the army. We became good friends. His martial arts were truly impressive. He saved my life several times and taught me many self-defense techniques. We were assigned to the same battalion, and later we went together on a raid on Qizhou. There, I saw a man whose back view looked just like my brother's. But half his face was scarred and pitted, not nearly as handsome and heroic as my brother. I knew my brother had never liked me since I was a child, because I was a bastard. But whenever others bullied me, he would help chase them away, teach me how to fight back, and buy me candied hawthorn on a stick to cheer me up. So it didn't matter that he didn't like me, he was still my brother. Anyway, I'm going to avenge him. I fought the Khitan with all my might. In a daze, I thought I saw my brother and the blade swinging toward him. When I came to, I really did see my brother. I thought I'd died too, but then I saw Qingwen, who was hard to describe. He told me wed one. He also told me that was my brother, that I wasn't dead, and neither was he. This good news nearly made me faint with joy. When I came to again, my brother was already preparing to return to the capital. I wanted to go back too. I wanted to follow my brother. But Lady Lu, who had nursed me for several months, suddenly came to see me. Seeing me in such a pitiful state, she wept so hard she could barely catch her breath. and even scolded my brother for failing to protect me. I told her to shut up, but she actually had my servant send my brother a cup of poisoned tea. Thankfully, Jin'an was on guard. He knocked the teacup over and detained the servant. Aunt Lu really put me in a terrible spot. I finally managed to mend things a bit with my brother. What on earth was she trying to achieve with this drama? But before I could ask her what on earth she was thinking, she left a note and hanged herself. The note said she was the one who tried to poison my brother. She just couldn't stand the way he treated me like a slave and wanted to help me get rid of him. I really have her whole family to thank for that. My brother left me in Yuzhou, telling me to recover from my injuries before returning. I obeyed and did as he said. But I never imagined that when I returned to the capital, the gossip sweeping through the city would be that someone had accused my parents of poisoning Princess Anyang. I thought I must have heard wrong. But when Linyu, her eyes red from crying, threw herself into my arms and told me that my parents had hurriedly married her off to spare her from being implicated, I realized it was all true. I went to beg my brother for help, but he refused to see me. I knew then that he was behind all of this. In that moment, I hated him with every fiber of my being. But my stepsister-in-law said, "At least you've enjoyed your parents' love for over 20 years. But the moment your brother lost his mother, he lost his father as well." I wanted to argue that mother loved Huo Linyuan too, but in that instant, I recalled the question Jin'an had asked me after old lady Liu's death. Did she really want to kill the general? All this time, I had subconsciously avoided that answer, afraid to think it through. In that moment, I could no longer deceive myself. Fortunately, Huo Linyuan wasn't a heartless man. Though my parents' murder of imperial family members was a capital offense punishable by dismemberment, in the end, they were sentenced only to exile in Lingnan. As long as I was alive, it was all right. As long as I was alive, I still had my parents. After that, I followed my parents to Lingnan, thinking I would never see Huo Linyuan again in this lifetime. Huo Lixing's side story. I know Su Huizhu isn't the same woman who schemed against my brother back then. She's clever, calculating, and cunning. Yang sure wouldn't stand a chance against her. How interesting. But she's also quite peculiar. Ever since she married into the Huo family, she's been stockpiling grain and medicinia venture that's nearly drained her entire savings. She's even sold several estates and shops. Then, bit by bit, she's been shipping those supplies to Yuzhou, a frontier region where war could break out at any moment. What is she up to? Selling them at a high price to the imperial court, or to the Khitan. I had people keep a close watch on her movements, but I never expected that she would send all that grain and medicine to Qizhou. I've run through the scenario many times. Qizhou is a place that's easy to defend but hard to attack. To recapture it, this city alone would require at least 20,000 troops, and that's assuming ample supplies. But later, it wasn't just Kazuzic cities in total, including Yun, Wei, Wu, Xin, and Ru, were all recaptured by my brother. Yes, my brother wasn't dead after all. He had accomplished what no one in Dayong had managed to do in over 100 years. My brother returned to the capital safely and became the Grand General of Honor and Might, second only to the Emperor. It was then that I realized Su Wiz's grain and medicine had actually been intended for my brother. But how did she know my brother would be besieged in Qizhou? I grew increasingly curious about her, especially since Shet also found evidence for my brother proving that the Yang family and my father had killed our mother all those years ago. She held so many secrets, yet she was frighteningly candid. She said she didn't want to be confined to the four walls of the inner quarters. She wanted to go out and see the world, to expand her business to the ends of the earth. I want to see the world too. I've read countless books, yet I've never even left the capital. The farthest I've gone is the villa on the outskirts of the city. My brother didn't ask her to stay, probably because he knew he couldn't keep her. He seemed a little downcast. So, with a selfish motive, I sought out my sister-in-law. Sister-in-law, I'd like to go with you and see the world too. But her eyes lit up astonishingly. They'll plead your case with your brother. Make sure he agrees. My brother's fine in battle, but when it comes to matters of the heart, he's a bit too by-the-book. He doesn't want to force my sister-in-law to stay. Yet he asks her to share her experiences with him, isn't that just tying an invisible string around her? But whether she's willing to be tied down depends entirely on her own preferences. How passive is that? Since she's interested, taking the initiative can't be wrong. I planned to make Su Huizhu my real sister-in-law, but I discovered that my sister-in-law's brother-in-law from her maternal side has actually been setting his sights on her all along. He's a bit of a strange guy. He's always spouting nonsense about this life and past lives. And when he's drunk, he even goes around claiming that my sister-in-law is his wife and that she bore him 2 children. In his story, my sister-in-law was very good to him, but he didn't cherish her. He hurt her because of Su Linyuan. And he's filled with extreme regret over it. His regret is truly both stupid and disgusting. So I set him up with a classmate of his, and together they stumbled upon Su Linyuan and Manu having an affair. He went berserk, lunging forward to kill the 2 of them, but unexpectedly, Su Linyuan struck him on the head with a club, and he rolled his eyes and kicked the bucket. Su Linyuan was also sentenced to be beheaded after the harvest for the crimes of adultery and murdering her husband. My sister-in-law's parents were a pair of fools, spending their days weeping and begging her for help, constantly claiming she owed Su Linyuan a debt. I really can't understand how, even at a time like this, they still couldn't figure out who they could rely on in the future. My sister-in-law was utterly fed up with them, so I devised a little scheme. I had her father stripped of his official post and, at the same time, took a beautiful concubine into his household. Now let her parents worry about their own domestic affairs. Later, my sister-in-law took me to many places and introduced me to many people. I discovered how harsh life was in this world, and how especially difficult it was for women. Gradually, I seemed to find a path I wanted to follow. I wanted to create a path where women in this world would no longer have to depend on their fathers, brothers, husbands, or sons to find their place in life. So later, even though my sister-in-law opposed it, I married the 5th prince and helped him ascend to the throne. After all, a fool has his own advantage, so at least eliminating him wouldn't require much effort. Later, when my son was 2 years old, his father, the emperor, died of illness. I became Empress Dowager and, with my brother's assistance, ruled from behind the curtain, taking control of the Deyong court. 8 years later, in response to the calls of the court officials, I ascended the throne as emperor and changed the nation's name to Zhou. My story has only just begun. The story ends here. Thank you for listening.